Picture this: you're cleaning out your parents' attic, and you stumble upon a box of your childhood belongings. But instead of finding toys or old-school photos, you discover something far more fascinating, a time capsule of technology that once defined your daily life. That chunky cell phone you thought was cutting edge. The MP3 player that held your entire music identity in 256 megabytes. The digital camera that felt like magic compared to film. These weren't just gadgets. They were portals to new worlds, status symbols, and for many of us, our first real connection to the digital age. And now, they belong in museums. Literally. Welcome to a journey through the technology graveyard, where innovation goes to become history. Let's start with something that exists today only as a symbol, the save icon. You know the one. That little square with the sliding metal piece. Millennials and Gen Z see it every day without knowing what it represents. It's a floppy disk, and for those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, it was our hard drive, our cloud, our everything. The 3.5-inch floppy disk could hold a whopping 1.44 megabytes of data. To put that in perspective, a single photo from your smartphone today is typically 3 to 5 megabytes. One photo would need 3 or 4 floppy disks. Installing a program? Get ready to swap disks like a Vegas dealer shuffling cards. But here's what made them special: they were tangible. You could hold your data, label it with a Sharpie, build towers with them when you were bored. There was something satisfying about that mechanical click when you inserted one into the drive, and the grinding whir as it read your precious files. The Smithsonian Institution now houses floppy disks in their collections. What once sat in piles on every desk now sits behind glass, a reminder that even the most ubiquitous technology eventually becomes archaeology. Friday night, 1995. Your family is heading to Blockbuster Video. The excitement is palpable. Tonight, you get to pick the movie. You rush to the new releases wall, hoping someone returned that copy of Jurassic Park you've been dying to see. Victory. It's there. One copy, sitting on the shelf like the Holy Grail. This was the VHS era, and it defined home entertainment for 2 decades. The video home system, VHS for short, put movies in our living rooms. Before streaming, before DVDs, before on-demand anything, we had these magnetic tape rectangles that required rewinding and could be ruined by sitting too close to a magnet. Remember the anxiety of renting a tape, getting home, and discovering the previous renter didn't rewind it? Or worse, finding out someone recorded over your favorite movie with a soap opera. The horror. VHS players were in 90% of American homes by the late 90s. They were as essential as refrigerators. Now, they're museum pieces. The Museum of Obsolete Media has an entire section dedicated to video formats, with VHS holding a place of honor. Kids today don't know the satisfaction of perfectly timing the pause button to skip commercials on a recorded show, or the art of tracking adjustment when the picture got fuzzy. The last VHS player was manufactured in 2016. An entire format, gone. But for those of us who lived it, we'll never forget the magic of holding a movie in our hands. Before smartphones, before texting, before we could reach anyone at any time, there was the pager. Known colloquially as a beeper, this small device clipped to your belt and made you feel incredibly important. When it buzzed, you knew someone needed you. The problem? You had no idea why. Pagers displayed only numbers, which led to an entire secret language. 143 meant, I love you, 1 letter in I, 4 in love, 3 in you. 911 meant emergency. 07734, when read upside down, spelled hello. We were cryptographers, encoding messages in numeric sequences just to communicate basic information. The ritual was this: your pager buzzes, you look at the number, then you find a payphone, remember those, and call back. The whole process could take 15 minutes. Today, we get anxious if someone doesn't respond to our text within 15 seconds. Pagers weren't just for doctors and drug dealers, though pop culture would have you believe otherwise. By the mid-90s, teenagers wore them as status symbols. Having a pager meant you were connected, important, in demand. The fact that most of us only got pages from our parents asking us to come home for dinner was beside the point. The National Museum of American History has pagers in their collection, recognizing them as pivotal technology in the evolution of mobile communication. They represented our first steps toward constant connectivity, a concept that now dominates our lives so completely we can barely imagine life without it. EEAWWWKSDH ding 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 whoosh. If you just heard that sound in your head, welcome, fellow internet pioneer. That screeching, grinding symphony was the sound of your modem connecting to the internet. It was the digital equivalent of a car engine turning over on a cold morning. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, and you never quite knew which you'd get. Dial-up internet connected through your phone line, which meant two things: it was painfully slow, and nobody could call you while you were online. This led to epic family battles. Get off the internet. I'm expecting a call. But Mom, I'm downloading a song. It's been 45 minutes. It's only 90% done. Yes, downloading a single 3 megabyte MP3 could take half an hour. A photograph? 15 minutes, and it loaded from top to bottom in agonizing increments. You'd wait to see if the picture was worth it, watching the image reveal itself line by line like a reverse striptease. Streaming video? Forget it. Streaming anything? Not happening. We had a different internet, one that required patience, planning, and the wisdom to start downloads before bed so they'd be ready by morning. Peak dial-up speed was 56 kilobits per second. Today's average internet speed is over 200 megabits per second, roughly 3,500 times faster. We went from waiting hours to download an album to streaming 4K video without a second thought in just 2 decades. The Computer History Museum in Silicon Valley preserves modems as crucial artifacts of the Internet's infancy. They represent a time when getting online was an event, an achievement, something you deliberately chose to do rather than a constant state of being. The Sony Discman promised freedom. Finally, we could take our CD collection anywhere, jogging, on the bus, to school. There was just one tiny problem: physics. The Discman had no skip protection in early models, which meant every step, bump, or slight jostle interrupted your music. Want to go running with your Discman? Hope you enjoy silence, because that disc isn't going to play continuously. We developed strategies. Walk with bent knees to absorb shock. Carry it perfectly level like a waiter with a tray of champagne glasses. Some people even strapped it to their heads, reasoning that the skull was the most stable platform. Fashion was secondary to function. Later models introduced ESP, electronic skip protection, with 40 seconds of buffer memory. This was revolutionary. You could almost move normally. The technology seemed like witchcraft. How could it play the music even when the disc stopped spinning? We didn't question it. We just enjoyed finally being able to walk and listen simultaneously. But Discmen, were bulky. They ate batteries like Pac-Man 8 dots. The anti-skip technology drained power even faster. You'd get maybe 3 hours of playtime on 2 AA batteries if you were lucky. And you could only carry so many CDs in your case before your bag weighed as much as a bowling ball. Still, at the time, it felt like the future. Personal, portable music in digital quality. What more could we want? As it turns out, quite a lot. But we didn't know that yet. Museums now display Discmans as examples of transitional technology, the bridge between the Walkman tape player and the iPod. They represent humanity's restless drive to make everything smaller, better, more convenient, even when the current version seems perfectly adequate. October 2001. Steve Jobs stood on a stage and pulled a small white device from his pocket. 1,000 songs in your pocket, he said. The iPod had arrived, and music would never be the same. The first-generation iPod held 5 gigabytes of music, roughly 1,000 songs, as advertised. Compared to a Discman, which held one CD at 12 to 15 songs, this was revolutionary. Your entire music collection, available instantly. No more choosing which albums to bring. No more changing discs. Just scroll, click, and play. But the iPod was more than storage. It was design. That white exterior. The click wheel. The satisfying scroll through your library. Apple understood something others didn't. Technology isn't just about function, it's about feeling. The iPod felt good to hold, good to use, good to be seen with. Those white earbuds became a cultural signifier. You could spot an iPod user from across the street. The iPod also marked the beginning of the end for music ownership as we knew it. With iTunes, music became files, not physical objects. You didn't own a CD, you owned data. This shift seemed minor at the time but would reshape the entire music industry. From iTunes, we'd eventually move to streaming, where we don't even own the data, we rent access to vast libraries that can disappear at any moment. The iPod Classic was discontinued in 2014, after selling over 400 million units. Now, barely a decade later, dedicated music players seem quaint. Why carry a separate device when your phone does everything? The Smithsonian has an iPod in its permanent collection, recognizing it as one of the most influential consumer products of the 21st century. For many of us, the iPod was our first Apple product, our gateway drug to the ecosystem we live in today. There has never been, and will never be, anything as satisfying as ending an argument by flipping a phone shut. Snap. Conversation over. The flip phone gave physical weight to digital communication. You didn't just hang up, you emphatically closed a device. It was definitive. Final. No touch screen could ever replicate that tactile satisfaction. The Motorola Razr, released in 2004, was the pinnacle of flip phone design. Impossibly thin at 13 mm, sleek, metallic, it was the iPhone before the iPhone, the phone everyone wanted. Celebrities flipped them open on red carpets. Business executives flipped them in meetings. Teenagers flipped them in hallways. The flip was universal. But flip phones were more than just satisfying closures. They were durable. Drop your smartphone, and you hold your breath hoping the screen survived. Drop a flip phone, and it might chip the floor. Those things were Nokia-level indestructible. The flip mechanism protected the screen and keypad, making them practically damage-proof. They were also perfectly designed for their purpose. Phone calls and text messages, that's it. No apps demanding attention, no notifications creating anxiety, no infinite scroll stealing your time. You used your phone intentionally, then put it away. Revolutionary concept, right? The iPhone launched in 2007, and within 5 years, flip phones were essentially extinct. The smartphone takeover was swift and total. By 2012, even die-hard flip phone defenders had converted. The touchscreen won. But lately, there's been a resurrection. Samsung and Motorola have released modern flip phones, smartphones that fold. We're nostalgic for that flip action, even if we won't give up our apps and internet. It's telling that even in our age of infinite technological possibility, we still miss the simple satisfaction of snapping a phone shut. Museums of technology now display flip phones as examples of purpose-built design, devices that did specific things extremely well before we decided everything should do everything. Before smartphone cameras, before Instagram, before we photographed every meal and moment, there were digital cameras. Separate devices, dedicated to taking pictures. And they had a limitation that shaped how we photographed: memory. Early digital cameras held maybe 30 pictures. You had to choose what to photograph. A birthday party? You'd take 10 photos total, max. A vacation? You'd think carefully about each shot. Delete bad photos to make room for more. This wasn't unlimited cloud storage, this was finite, precious memory on a card you could hold. This scarcity made us intentional photographers. You didn't take 15 pictures of the same sunset hoping one would be good. You took one, maybe two. You composed the shot, checked the tiny LCD screen, and if it was blurry or bad, you deleted it immediately to free up space. Quality over quantity wasn't a philosophy, it was a necessity. Then you had to get the photos onto your computer using a cable or card reader, organize them in folders, and maybe, if you were motivated, edit them. Sharing meant emailing individual photos or, if you were really ambitious, creating a web page. Social media as we know it didn't exist. Your photos lived on your hard drive and maybe in a physical album if you went to the effort of printing them. The resolution seems laughable now. 3 megapixels was standard. High-end cameras might have 5. Today's smartphones have 12, 24, even 48 megapixel cameras. We've gone from carefully rationing 30 photos to taking hundreds without thinking. Technology museums now house digital cameras from the early 2000s, preserving them as stepping stones toward our current reality where every device is a camera, every moment is photographable, and we take more pictures before breakfast than our grandparents took in a year. In 1989, Nintendo released a handheld gaming console with a green-tinted screen, no backlight, and graphics that looked primitive even by contemporary standards. It ran on 4 AA batteries. It was bulky and uncomfortable to hold for extended periods. It was perfect. The Game Boy became one of the best-selling gaming devices of all time, moving over 118 million units worldwide. Why? Because it prioritized gameplay over graphics, battery life over processing power, and durability over aesthetics. The Game Boy was a tank. There's a famous unit that survived the Gulf War, was hit by a bombing, and still works. It's on display at the Nintendo store in New York City, still playing Tetris despite being partially melted. The games were equally indestructible. Those cartridges could be dropped, thrown, sat on, and they'd still work. Just blow on the contacts, a ritualistic gesture every gamer performed despite Nintendo's protests that it did nothing, and you were good to go. The placebo effect was real, and we believed in it. The Game Boy represented portable freedom. Long car rides became tolerable. Waiting rooms became gaming sessions. Recess continued indoors when it rained. Link cables allowed multiplayer gaming, physically connecting 2 Game Boys so you could trade Pokémon or battle in Tetris. Gaming was social in a tangible, physical way. Later versions added color and backlighting, but something was lost in translation. The original Game Boy with its green screen and physical limitations forced creative game design. Developers couldn't rely on graphics, so they focused on addictive gameplay. Tetris on the Game Boy is still one of gaming's purest experiences. The Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, has an extensive Game Boy collection, recognizing these devices as culturally significant artifacts that defined childhood for a generation. They represent a time when gaming was something you did, then stopped, rather than an always available distraction in your pocket. Before Wikipedia, before Google, before the internet contained the sum of human knowledge, we had Encarta. Microsoft's multimedia encyclopedia came on a CD-ROM and felt like the future. Videos. Sound clips. Interactive maps. All the information you could ever need, on a single disc. For students in the 90s, Encarta was revolutionary. Research papers that once required library visits and physical encyclopedias could now be completed at home. Copy and paste was possible, though teachers quickly learned to recognize Encarta's writing style in suspiciously sophisticated papers. The search function felt like magic compared to flipping through index volumes. But Encarta had a fundamental limitation: it was static. The disc contained whatever information was included when it was pressed. Want updated information? Buy next year's edition. A new discovery in science? Wait 12 months. Breaking news? Not happening. The entire model was built on the idea that knowledge was fixed, contained, and needed experts to curate it. Wikipedia changed everything. Launched in 2001, it represented a radical idea, that collective knowledge, constantly updated and freely accessible, could be more valuable than expert-curated, annually updated commercial products. Wikipedia could be edited in real time. When news broke, the article was updated immediately. Errors could be corrected instantly. Encarta couldn't compete. Microsoft discontinued it in 2009, effectively admitting that the Internet had won. The CD-ROM model of information distribution was obsolete. Knowledge had become fluid, collaborative, and free. Museums now preserve Encarta disks as artifacts of the pre-Internet information age. They represent humanity's last attempt to contain knowledge in a physical, controlled format before we surrender to the chaos and collective wisdom of the Internet. Here's what's remarkable: most of the technology we've discussed didn't gradually fade away. It was killed, swiftly and definitively, by a device you're probably holding right now, your smartphone. Think about it. Your phone is a camera, music player, gaming device, encyclopedia, telephone, television, radio, calculator, calendar, alarm clock, compass, flashlight, voice recorder, and so much more. It's replaced dozens of dedicated devices, each of which seemed essential at the time. The technology in your pocket would have seemed like science fiction just 20 years ago. The original iPhone had more computing power than the systems that guided Apollo 11 to the moon. We carry supercomputers and use them primarily to look at memes and argue with strangers. But here's the twist: in 20 years, today's cutting-edge technology will be museum-worthy too. Your iPhone 15 will sit in a display case next to floppy disks and VHS tapes. Your AirPods will be antiques. Whatever feels permanent and essential right now is temporary. Technology moves faster than human perception of change. The question isn't whether today's technology will become obsolete, it's what we'll be nostalgic for when it does. Will we miss the satisfying click of closing apps? The ritual of charging overnight? The specific weight and feel of today's devices? What seems mundane now will be quaint then. Every piece of technology in a museum was once the future. Someone held it and felt the same sense of possibility and progress we feel with today's gadgets. The pace of change hasn't slowed, if anything, it's accelerating. What took 20 years to become obsolete now takes 5. So the next time you're cleaning out your attic and find an old gadget, don't throw it away. You're holding history. You're holding a moment when humanity believed this was the pinnacle of innovation, right before we invented something better. That floppy disk, that Discman, that flip phone, they're not trash. They're artifacts of our collective journey toward whatever comes next. And whatever comes next, it'll be in a museum too, eventually. That's the beautiful,